Male Psychology, Part 2. A very warm welcome, gentlemen. In Part 1, there were some basic things covered, but essentially, the issue that I'm trying to tackle and address is why men behave the way they do around women when it is so hostile to do so, and more importantly, how we can address this by altering the way that we behave, whether it be temporarily or even permanently. You see, we have already agreed that we see the dangers and the traps for men. We've also learned about female behaviour. Now, can we change the way that we behave? And if so, how deep can this go? Sure, we can change the pattern of our behaviour on a temporary level, but can we do so on a permanent level? Now, if we can't do this on a permanent level, how can we make a temporary change last for as long as possible? Evolutionary psychology. The branch of psychology that studies the mental adaptations of humans to a changing environment, especially differences in behaviour, cognition, etc. How far can we take this? How fast can we go? Can we really make it happen? In the part 1 of male psychology, there were many comments and even videos that were presented by various men that I found extremely interesting. There were also some new terms that I learned which I found extremely interesting. One such presentation was put together by JGG. In his presentation, he brings into light the terms gynophilia and androphilia. The two terms were previously alien to myself in the past, but I found them to be extremely interesting. This is a snippet from his presentation, and a link to his full video will be found in the description box.
You guys already know that entirely. And the only way to do that, the only way to reject gynocentrism, is to stop giving energy and power to the source of it, which is gynophilia. Gynophilia is the normal and natural attraction to females, but as previously stated, you guys aren't entirely attracted, of course, you're not at all attracted to females' narcissistic, megalomaniacal behavior and toxic, selfish, gynocentric, and misandric, highly manipulative nature of females, of course. And as stated, you aren't truly attracted to females' beauty because you are in part attracted to what's there naturally. But most of it, I said before, around 80 to 85% of it is entirely fictitious and the product of artificial intervention displayed to grab men's attention and boost men's gynophilia. Now, the opposite of gynophilia is androphilia. So the new formula that you were talking about before would be to promote, in theory, to promote androphilia. Now, a lot of men, a lot of MGTOWs, they don't really understand that because they're very confused. There is a lot of confusion. We were talking about labels, we were talking about different words, and I understand a lot of people don't really know the meaning of that.
Now, from a concentrated level, one can automatically see solutions to many of the problems that men face today, but only when one understands what androphilia actually means. Many men may get the wrong impression if one doesn't understand what androphilia actually encompasses. However, one can understand the androphilia model better when one understands the gynophilia model and then flips that back to the androphilia model. Now, how can we do this? Well, let's put into perspective what we actually have today to describe a gynophilia model. We pretty much have a system that constantly barrages us with the female body, whether it be the Kardashians' buttocks on a pedestal or Miley Cyrus hypersexualized, constant warnings to not rape or harass females, even though we have no intention in doing so, giving females praise for things that men do, which we don't get praise for, etc., etc., etc. Ultimately, this can actually also be called female worship. Now, many may not really think much about the female worship part, as in that part of the equation does not really tick them off. It's actually the stuff that led to that, such as the ass, the tits, excessive admiration and adulation that ticks them off, but not the female worship part. When one flips the tables though and causes the androphilia model to be upheld, many men will be like, but that is so gay. Well, is it really? What is gay? There is a very big difference between a system that is androphilia and actual homosexuality. Just like females that promote and push for a gynophiliac system don't have to be gay, men that push for an androphiliac system don't have to be gay either. One system cannot survive in the other. It's either this one or that one. If one wants to argue that maybe we can have a system based on equality, well, all one has to do is look around and see where that has taken us. Reclaiming masculinity is not gay. Neither is it homosexual. Living in a system that is androphiliac would provide a much better environment for men to live in. Men also need not be shamed into being proud of who they are. On the contrary, men should be proud of who they are and the stuff that they carry. Did the Greeks have a system that was androphiliac? If you look at the statues that they displayed, you would see men that were full bare, just like the Kardashians and even prostitutes of today. But today, who has the power and who had the power back then? If you analyze pornography today and carefully read between the lines, you will notice that an average-looking female is being advertised as being hot or sexy, and a good-looking man is just lucky. Lucky? Well, that is gynophilia for you. Reverse the table and you have the average-looking female who is lucky and the good-looking man being hot or sexy. That is androphilia. The efforts of men going their own way as a collective may actually lead us to a state of androphilia without us actually trying to pursue this destination deliberately. This would obviously depend on how hard MGTOW impacts society, especially in the long term, and also if it is in the interests of government to implement legislation that is pro-male, which would obviously cause an acceleratory contribution. So this is a viable solution. How do we hold on to such a state if we actually did attain this? Will we learn from the past in order that we don't make the same mistakes that give rise to gynophilia? I personally believe that the quality of life for both males and females would be better in an androphiliac world. A simple reason as to why is if one looks into the studies where single mothers raise children as compared to single fathers that raise their kids, one will realize that the single fathers raised more successful children. If we were to establish an androphiliac model, we would have to sustain it by clutching onto it as if it's the essence of life itself. If not, the gynophiliac system would rise again and men's lives would burn into ashes. This androphilia model is not only a viable solution, but also a long-term solution, as long as men are able to keep their eye on the ball and not let it slip away. Remember, masculinity is not gay, nor is it homosexual. There were some very interesting comments that were posted as well that are very deep, which I would like to raise. For example, Messenger Rising commented with, "We can't change the past, but we can rewire the faulty connections in our brains, neural pathways, and create new ones made stronger with the repetition of similar healthy input. We can then pass this information on to others and more importantly give our children the information that our parents were never able to give us. If enough new information is passed down to the next generation and spread throughout this generation, we could break the cycle of suffering. If a human is giving the ability or permission to impose any suffering on others without consequence, they will more often than not take that opportunity and use it as an outlet for sadistic tendencies they may have. Prison officers are prone to this and will often abuse inmates and neglect the duty of care that they have to inmates. People are very cruel if society allows it. We have to make it clear that discrimination of men is abuse. There has to be punishment measured out to create fear of consequences for actions, and all threats of punishment needs to be enforced. We need to put the fear into people who are committing the abuse, spreading awareness, taking back power and authority, punishment and fear of consequence for abusing others. We are already spreading awareness. The others' points need to be implemented by changing laws. by force rather, or by complete collapse of society as we know it, which is also happening gradually. Now, this statement is an in-depth statement that not only elaborates on solutions, but also the negative impacts that are imposed on men if we don't come up with any solutions. We need to rewire the faulty connections in our brains, the neural pathways, and create new ones, made stronger with the repetition of similar, healthy input. I have had the pleasure to discuss this specific point with messengerizing on a hangout in the past. This point is a very realistic method to elevate out of the darkness and rise up into the light. What messengerizing is saying here is that our weaknesses need to be addressed and our minds need to be programmed into functioning in a better way, a way that suits us better. We need to create new positive connections, memories, abilities, attributes, thinking, etc. And then galvanize these things by revisiting these positive neurons or files, if I may. I will read that statement again because when one goes over it and breaks it down, the final understanding of that statement becomes much easier to absorb, and the galvanizing process is in actual effect. Quote, "We need to rewire the faulty connections in our brains, the neural pathways, and create new ones made stronger with the repetition of similar healthy input." Unquote. This is a long-term solution that, in my opinion, is very realistic and practical. When I say long-term here, I don't mean that it can't have an impact right away. On the contrary, this is the type of solution that would have an immediate positive impact on one's well-being and also long-term positive impact. Imagine a world where men were able to walk outdoors freely without the bother of females shaking their bottoms or meticulous makeup, flirtatious and promiscuous behavior. After all, we all know where that would end up if a female wanted to skin that man. Legislation is there to support her skin that man and milk him for all he has got. Sean Flynn also wrote another comment, which is food for thought. KISS, KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. Something to consider when delving into the subject of male psyche. Very important subject for MGTOW is a changing of our psychology. Experience a euphemism we give to our greatest mistakes. He says, not sure who said this, but I am experienced enough to select MGTOW. There are some very deep comments that were posted by Tifa Lockhart, and Mate takes part in MGTOW in the same thread. Tifa Lockhart uses an analogy of sex being a drug that females dish out to men and pretty much control it in some way, shape or form to ultimately control men for utility. Mate takes part in MGTOW also elaborated on this and makes mention of endorphins that are released in the brain when a man has sex, which will lead him to crave for more sex, which obviously leads him to chase females for that sex, for they are, at this point, the gateway to that sex. He mentions quitting and going cold turkey and state that this is a very hard thing to do, yet it's not impossible, comparing the addiction to sex like the addiction to alcohol. This is where I would like to introduce hypersexuality. In a gynocentric or gynophiliac world, why would it then come as a surprise that female bodies are always being barraged to men's minds, men's eyes, on television, magazines, newspapers, etc.? What type of gain is there from a hub of power to be interested in performing this type of action, an action which is ultimately sexualizing men to a point where men are being hyper aroused, yet are told to back off? We used to call this prick teasing. It has become socially acceptable for a female to wear absolutely nothing and walk in the streets, yet a man will be shamed if he was to do the same. This is gynophilia at its pinnacle and greatest heights. Look, but don't touch. Taste, but don't eat, constantly controlling men via male psychology because they know that men are creatures who are controlled by sexual desire once that desire has reached a specific point. We need to unlearn some patterns of our own behavior, or better yet, change the world around us to suit and accommodate for men, hence therefore introducing an androphiliac world. The two terms gynophilia and androphilia are not to be taken lightly. It is self-evident that we cannot change and coordinate our male psychology absolutely based on natural terms, within natural boundaries, but can there be a type of module that men can purchase, which can be a voluntary decision to make? For example, a module the size of a 20-cent coin or even smaller. As we progress into the future, whilst we live in these gynophiliac times, that can be placed behind one's ear that can send an uncomfortable tingle to one's mind, causing some slight discomfort to the male when a male has been or is about to be sexually aroused. How would such a model function? Am I taking this too far? Well, considering that Western society is a vampirical society that needs men to be hypersexualized in order that men make irrational decisions, so that men can cause themselves to give up all their wealth and material belongings, do not think that the gynocentric society would take this in their stride. On the contrary, this would cause fear in the hearts of the ones that would need hypersexualization to keep today's gynophiliac society to function. Using reverse psychology, they may say, look at what men need to do to control their own behavior. But deep down, and in the long term, it will be they who will be at a loss. Men will avoid females, therefore avoiding marriage and even de facto relationships. Men will avoid losing their children. Men's suicide rates would drop. Men would get richer, wealthier, happier, and most of these problems that we see men having today would just disappear. You would have females and legislation bending over backwards, trying to cater and pander for men. It's just a thought. Then there are some other simpler solutions which are just on a basic level of government legislation. Legislation that causes female behaviour to react and treat men like human beings. For example, scrapping the no-fault divorce policy that is embedded in the Family Law Act of 1975. If a female knows that she is going to get a great deal by divorcing the father of her children, she will happily do so. But I can assure you that if divorcing the father of her children would end up in a fair divorce, she would think twice. Females are hypergamous creatures, and if there is no gain, then usually there is no motive. These type of solutions are quite simple, fast and effective. However, governments usually have their own motives as well, and one never knows when they will backflip on men, as they have done so in the past. In Australia, this has actually occurred where the government did backflip on men. It is a long journey into understanding male psychology, and I am not satisfied with what I have addressed due to the fact that there is much to cover and understand and be implemented. But so far, what I do know is the fact that our environment definitely plays a significant role that heavily impacts the ways that we as males behave. I have added Apotheosis Divine's video link in the description box.
Instinctively in our DNA to naturally be highly attracted towards females. I know the reason I am because I just find them beautiful and sexy, and there are other things I find beautiful, like landscapes, space, planets. Anything really that holds sheer beauty will catch my attention. So to only put the psychology upon women would have to mean you have to look in deeper and put it upon everything that is beautiful in the universe to really find the answer. And it may be simpler than you realize.